One thing my father always said to me was that if you ever think you're going to know everything about this business, you're sadly mistaken, and you always have to have the will and the want to continue learning.
Hey everyone, welcome to Leadership in the Dealership, the podcast where we dive into the latest trends shaping the automotive world with insights from today's thought leaders. I'm your host, Danielle Mills-Walden, and I'm super excited for our discussion today with the phenomenal Janelle Ross, who is the president of Bob Ross Automotive in Centerville, Ohio. Janelle, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you, Danielle. Happy to be here with you today.
Well, it has been an honor to be able to speak with you. I've heard about you from so many different people, and to finally get to talk is something that I've been looking forward to all day. But for those who are maybe meeting you for the first time, a part of our audience, could you maybe get into how you got started in this industry and give us a little bit of history about Bob Ross Automotive?
Sure. Fortunately, I've had the opportunity to grow up in the automobile business as my dad became an auto dealer when I was 4 years old, and we are celebrating our 50th year in business this year. So you can denote how old I am. So my dad had a lot of firsts in the industry. He was the first to graduate, and he was in the first General Motors Minority Dealer Academy. He was the first to graduate, and he was the first to have a dealership, a Buick dealership in Indiana. And then that went to Ohio when we moved 5 years later. So we've been at our present location for the last 45 years. As a result of when we moved to our Centerville location, it was a Buick and Mercedes-Benz dealership. So that entitled him to being the first African American Mercedes-Benz dealer in 1979.
Wow. So many things to kind of unpack there. I know you mentioned that he was the first African American owned Mercedes-Benz dealership in the world, right? There's no other one there. And then, with you kind of taking over and running that, how has that legacy shaped your approach with leadership and kind of the role that the dealership has faced in the community?
Well, unfortunately, my father passed at a very young age of 62 in 1997, and I took control of the day-to-day operations, and I was 27 years old at the time. So most of our managers and key personnel were older than me or either had been in the business as long as I'd been living. So had a very seniored, skilled, knowledgeable staff, which was very comforting to have because they had been working with him for a number of years. So it provided us the opportunity to continue to make changes where we needed to, but didn't have to reinvent the wheel due to who we had a part of the team. So a very uncommon situation when the owner passes, but very grateful for his leadership to them and them realizing that they still had a wonderful opportunity for them and their families to be a part of the Bob Ross Auto Group.
Yeah, I feel like having your dad and your mom, like the leadership that you were surrounded by was so immense. I'm curious from your perspective, like how would you compare your leadership style with your team compared to your dad and your mom? Like, would you say that there's a lot of similarities or there are some major differences that you kind of bring to the table?
Well, it's interesting. When I took over the day-to-day operation, my brother and I were vice presidents at the time, and my mother became president. There were a lot of things that was a surprise that they did alike, which I would have never thought of. But putting her in that situation, it was kind of funny sometimes because I'm like, wow, that's something that he would have, said or something similar to what he may have done. But one thing that my father always realized that, it was the people that you surround yourself with that makes the team. And one thing and my mother was in education, so she was a big proponent of making sure that, you take advantage of all the resources that are available to you, regardless of where your skill set and knowledge is of wherever you are in your career. One thing my father always said to me was that if you ever think you're going to know everything about this business, you're sadly mistaken, and you always have to have the will and the want to continue learning. So it was like my mother took that to the nth degree and making sure that we, as well as our team, our leadership team made sure that we did have all the resources and making sure we took full advantage to making sure that we could do and provide the best for our internal customer, our team member, as well as our external customer, our actual customer. So one thing that I've always felt, because by me being younger, when I first got thrusted into this role, was, understanding that I can learn a lot from those around me, but was to gain their respect. And you don't have anything if you don't have the respect of your peers. Mm-hmm. And, they could either make us or break us. And so the one thing that I always say, even to new people coming on board, is if you think you can do your job 100% on your own, you're sadly mistaken. It takes more than just one person to sell a car, to repair a vehicle, to buy a part. There's multiple steps that need to be taken, and there's multiple departments that play into that success. So once, we figure that out and they understand that, it's not just that's their problem or, I did my job. It's a collective effort in order to make sure that we're doing our jobs 100% effectively.
No, I love that. It really takes everyone, and it takes everyone working together. And you mentioned, if you know everything, there's always something more than you can improve upon and learn from. So I'm curious from your perspective, when you got thrust into that role, 27 years old, what was a misconception that you kind of got faced with now that you're in this position?
That obviously there's not too many people that look like me. There was a lot of people, fellow dealers, auto dealers that would think that I worked for the manufacturer or the travel company. If I was at a dealer meeting, they would question the relevance of me being in the room. Unfortunately, that can still happen today, 27 years later, because there's still not many of anyone that looks like me in the room, which there are those that are in the works, and it's growing. So that it's just something that I feel that I've always had to have that educational kind of sign on as saying, I don't have to look like you in order to do what you do. And sometimes it takes the conversation of maybe one of my Caucasian peers to have that discussion with another auto dealer friend of theirs, of letting them know that not everyone has to look like us to do what we do.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful because like you mentioned, there isn't a lot of people that necessarily look like you or I in the spaces, but like you said, there's a lot more coming. And I'm curious, what advice would you give to somebody who looks like us, who wants to kind of get into this realm and they want to see themselves at a higher level, whether it be a manager, a GM, a dealer principal one day?
One thing that you have to be cognizant of is being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but I'm in situations, I'm in rooms, like I said, of people that don't necessarily look like me. So you have to not necessarily adapt, but you have to immerse yourself in those situations, make yourself a part of that situation and improve your value. And unfortunately, yes, you do have to maybe do it a little more often than others. But once you do that, they do take notice and, you develop friendships and working relationships with those. But just one thing that I always tell people, just don't lose sight of what you want. There's always going to be those that don't want to see you succeed, regardless of color, race, ethnicity, or gender. So that you just have to make sure that you surround yourselves with those that do have your best interest at heart. Criticism is good. So not sitting here saying that, you're great 100% of the time. You want to receive that criticism as well in order to make yourself better and your team better. But just, never lose sight of what you have in front of you and what you can do.
I love that. I love that message. And I think that's something that everybody can truly resonate with. Switching gears a little bit to kind of talk about the current challenges that you may have been facing. But I'm curious, you've been leading this dealer group for a long time. You've basically grown up with it and you've seen how the consumer has changed as well. Can you maybe talk about like some of the biggest changes you've noticed in the how consumers are approaching car buying and like what you've noticed and maybe some strategies that you guys have adapted at your dealer group to kind of meet these evolving expectations?
Well, I think we all were hit with a lot of change, during and not naturally now post COVID. Some good, some bad, and a lot in between. Some things we were all ready for, some things we weren't. The one thing that hasn't changed is that the consumer still drives the decision making and really how we need to adapt to handle their demands and their wants and their needs. Something my mother always said, that being in this business not necessarily makes you flexible, but more like being elastic. So, during those COVID times, we definitely were being elastic of really trying to just roll with the punches and figuring it out. For those that maybe weren't as heavily into digital retailing prior, it definitely level set everyone and made them fine tune their processes, including ourselves. Again, no one's perfect. And as everything kept evolving, you were having to adapt and change. So I think that's one thing that's, really compelled us to not be as focused on, the traffic coming through the door per se, but is really, trending towards that traffic coming through, your mobile device or desktop. So I think that's something that is not going away. It's going to continue. But again, it doesn't take the place of the structures of the dealership, because there are those that still want to come and feel and drive and go through that process after. They're just coming in with more, as I say, ammo of what they want. They've been doing more research online. People feel more comfortable using the sources online for research and definitely are coming in with much more knowledge about what they want and don't want compared to prior years. So I do think that's one thing that is here to stay.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, regardless of age, we're seeing like so many customers are starting that car buying process on their phone, and literally they could be in the dealerships, even scrolling on their phone, looking and comparing and shopping. So it's really arming your team with the necessary tools that they need to be able to help support these customers that now feel like they know everything when they're coming into the dealership.
That is true, because the internet's never wrong, but I'm just saying, so you got to make sure that you're on point there.
Would you, kind of off topic, but would you find that the consumers you have that come into your Buick GMC dealer operate a little bit differently than those Mercedes customers when it comes to the car buying experience?
In years past, I would say yes, but in today's market, no. I mean, we have the brands that we represent are, near luxury or luxury brands. So, there's several vehicles that are, in a 6-figure category across the board. So, their demands and wants and needs rank high up there with Mercedes-Benz as well. And it's, making sure, the technology in all of the vehicles and models that we represent, is, up to here. So, having those product concierges and those people that can really dissect the technology as well as on the technician side, and that's where we have diagnostic technicians and other layers of technicians to really help in assessing and diagnosing those situations. So I don't see it as a huge difference as maybe 5-10 years ago.
Okay. Well, that makes a ton of sense. And, you mentioned that you have service technicians and, you're kind of embracing technology all over your dealership. Would you say that in all facets, the technology has transformed in your dealership? And
absolutely,
do you feel like you've had to kind of raise the bar there to kind of meet the needs of where the customer is when it comes to the technology?
I do. And I think sometimes that's where the customer is a little overwhelmed of the amount of technology that is in their vehicle. And even for those that are a part of our team, even myself, of trying to make sure that, we know how to work something properly and not get frustrated. But, just even our day to day, is how much, everyone has two screens now in their office. You still have mobile devices, you still have iPads and Surface and tablets, and the technicians are armed and ready with their own digital components that they need to make sure that they're assessing concerns properly. So it's definitely taken a more heightened approach for everyone, regardless of their skill set and regardless of their position. And we all know that people don't necessarily like change, right, or may not see the positivity in change. So it's really trying to work with them to grasp that everyone has to kind of move forward together. And not everyone's going to be, unfortunately, at the same pace.
That is true. Worked with dealerships all over the country, and change is always something that everybody's kind of hesitant towards, but understanding that embracing the technology is going to ultimately be the future, and the future of way that car buyers are making these decisions. So that's super, super important. To kind of switch gears here, thinking about like this past couple months and the kind of economic climate that we're in, I'm curious, for your dealer group, what would you say is like the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome with everything that's been going on?
I think there's a little bit of uncertainty at this point of, what's to happen in 2025 from a tariff perspective, and how that'll impact from an, economic perspective. The other thing that's still causing us, true pains is skilled talent, and making sure that we have the right people in the right positions. And that's continuing to be an everyday, not concern, but opportunity. And it just, in years past, it may not have been as difficult. But I think, again, to COVID and post-pandemic, some people have, reassessed where they are and, have made some life changes for the betterment of themselves, personally. And so I think we're still feeling and reeling from that somewhat. And so just continuing to try to create value where we can with those that are interested in being a part of our industry, as well as continuing to expose the retail side of the business with different aspects of our community. So I had a conference call this morning with the community college here that we do a lot of work with in developing technicians, but we're working with them on developing skilled talent and our other needs within the dealership. So, trying to work with them as well as bringing other students in at varying levels, either middle school, high school, even college and grad, for them to understand and see the opportunities that it's not just turning wrenches and selling a car, but there's so much more that's happening behind these walls from a business perspective, technology, marketing, advertising, obviously sales, finance, accounting, you name it, for you to be involved in.
No, that's a really good point, and I love that you're leveraging your local community college, because I was gonna ask, like, to dive a little bit deeper into, you mentioned it was like the people and trying to get the right people in the right seats. Are you saying more like because of COVID, when things happen, there's people that like left and moved roles? Or are you saying like it's hard to bring in the right people because maybe you're getting people that are not familiar with automotive and they're having to learn that? Or kind of elaborate more with what you mean?
We're going a little, more far reaching than probably in the past of bringing those in that, because we're really in a customer service business. And, right, if you don't like people, you really should not be involved in the retail side of an automobile, of the automobile business, period, in any shape, way, or form, unless you're tucked away in a back office somewhere. But that's highly unlikely because there's so many of our positions that are people facing. So, that's one thing that we need to look at differently, post-COVID, as well as, Dayton used to be a very domestic manufacturing town, which is no longer. So a lot of that skill set, even from a, plant perspective and just loyalty factor has changed over time. So it's really just trying to bring about and create a new awareness to who and what we are, and utilizing our current team to help fulfill that, and incentivizing them as well to assist us in bringing those competent people into our organization.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. You got to leverage who you have around you, and all of the resources you have. And I've heard you speak on a number of different podcasts where you've mentioned, there's so many different roles of the dealership that people can be a part of, and you don't have to necessarily just be focusing on the car specifically. You could be in accounting or in other departments. And I think it's so cool that you really like stress that and focus that, because I was going to kind of ask you more about, like, if you were going to give advice to somebody that wants to maybe pivot in their role where they are today, what could they be looking at to focus on moving forward if they're in the dealership today and they're not really sure where they fit?
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we've devised this program with the community college, so that if someone comes in and says, all I've ever known is I wanted to be, or, my dad was a mechanic. Okay, well, now they're a technician, but maybe they don't really want to be hooked up to a computer all day. But unfortunately, it's all of us are at this point, regardless of our roles in the dealership, as well as even from the manufacturer side. So it's really like taking this program and taking them through the other departments so they can get a sense of what the other departments are about. So it's like you have someone who's interested in the industry, and then it's like you said, is how do we find that place? And so we've had some high school individuals before come in and do that from a technical perspective. And then they've gone on to some higher education that from the community college that's both technical as well as academic. And, they found that, I think I want to go on the sales side. And, one's become a finance manager. So I think as long as, and understanding it may be a onesie, twosie opportunity, but, if you can grow them and grow your own holistically, then it just provides, an even deeper appreciation for when they land in that role. And so that's what's the exciting part. Like, maybe it's not, maybe someone who thinks they want to go into accounting, but they realize they'd rather be on the service drive because they get to interact with more people on a daily basis as a service advisor. So, that's a whole different role, because you are 100% customer public facing, and you are providing them a need, and they're not always going to be happy. So can you yourself handle someone who's calling you that needs to tow their vehicle in, or I got a call this morning from one of my mother's friends that her heat went out and it's, 25 degrees. So, how do you handle that when you're faced with not just Danielle's coming in for an oil change and everything's great? So there's a different, mindset for that skill set. And, but if you have that opportunity to kind of rotate and really figure out what's best for you and see how you fit, then I think we're like, on the right track of increasing our opportunities within our business.
No, I love that. I love that for sure. I do want to find out from you, because I know that in the past you've talked about kind of EVs and kind of where they're going. And I'm curious, like, how are the EVs doing in your market, and kind of where do you see that going as we look into Q1?
Well, I think, again, there's a lot of back and forth in regards to where EVs are going to land. Obviously, they're not going to go away. I do think the consumer has really driven where the demand or lack of demand is. Even though the manufacturers have, most, if not, or majority of them have pushed to, with targets of full EV, a lot of them have had to, walk those targets back due to the lack of interest from the consumer. So, I think people are still on the fence. from the infrastructure perspective of making sure that they're not having that range anxiety. There's still a lot of misconception in regards to that. So the more and more that we can provide that infrastructure, the lessen, I believe, that will occur. In colder climates, people are concerned of, the change of range, as well as in extreme heat of what that looks like. So we have had some of our customers, question or inquire, this is what it says I'm going to get. But, those that are true enthusiasts or avid EV owners really are in tuned with their vehicle and what is going well and what is going not so well. And not that ICE consumers aren't, but it's just a little bit of an increased heightened awareness that they have and making sure that everything is said that they're supposed to have happens. So I do think over time, from an EV expansion, things will be even more refined. Obviously distances will be increased, in terms of range, infrastructure will be, much more, even with bringing Tesla into it for other manufacturers to jump on in the short term. So at least it can help lessen some of that. And then it just takes us all continuing to educate our current customer, that new customer, as well as ourselves on the benefits of being involved in an EV world.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you if the majority of the customers you have that come in inquiring about EVs, is it more just trying to get more information about them, or do you still have a lot of people who are super enthusiasts and they want it because it's that, or do you find that it's more people are they come in with their ICE car in mind, but then they're well, let me inquire a little bit and then maybe I'll make a decision later?
So it's really kind of interesting. It's and I hate to say it's kind of all over the map
Okay.
because it is. I mean, you have those that that the early adopters, which naturally are going to be those Tesla buyers or owners. And for a lot of them, they may be on their second or third, iteration of Tesla. But maybe they're looking to, now that there's others in the market, which there's a lot. So they may be branching out. And so their knowledge and foresight of what they have experienced to what they know and what they want is going to be much different than someone just walking into your point saying, hey, well, I have a Sierra Denali, but now I understand that you have a Sierra, an EV Sierra Denali. Walk me through this. I haven't given it any thought. My job takes me out, in very rural areas. How can help me to overcome that fear or anxiety of range? So those are conversations that are different than just give me the pros and cons of a new Sierra Denali compared to, a Ford F-150. So, those are that's where I'm saying we have to do our job and making sure that we're up to speed and how we can help educate the consumer. But again, the consumer's coming in with a lot more knowledge just based upon the internet. But, it could be a wide range of things. And how can we, segment that and bring it down to what's important to them?
No, I love that. I think that that's so important because honestly, even if I look at myself, I'm somebody that has always thought about the idea of moving towards an EV, but I've just never pulled the trigger just for various reasons. I've tried a rental a couple times with Hertz, a Tesla here or there, but I've just never done it. And it's I'm always just curious if other consumers are kind of the same way. Is next year going to be the year where a lot of people pull that trigger once they get that infrastructure up and it's better and more available for everybody else? But in closing, I kind of want to get inside your mind as we're looking into Q1, and what would you say is your bold prediction for what dealers need to be on the lookout for when it comes to Q1 of next year?
Well, I'm a former chair of the American International Auto Dealers Association, AIADA, and one thing that is always of utmost importance is making sure that all dealers understand the laws and all the things that can affect us from a legislative perspective. And there's going to be a lot of that to pay attention to in regards to potential tariffs, which could increase pricing on materials as well as just vehicles themselves. So it's really making sure that you're educated in regards to what's on the line for the automobile industry. And I mean, that's one thing that is going to have to be top of mind to making sure that the brands that you represent, how that plays in to the overall framework of the auto industry. So that is definitely one thing. Two, I think AI is going to continue to be a huge asset if used properly in varying ways within an auto dealership. We have found some success already in regards to our scheduling for service and internet leads. So those are another way of assisting and kind of streamlining processes and making things a little faster and quicker. Because that's one thing that COVID has, in my opinion, everyone seems to have little attention span. So the faster we can assist them, especially with making a service appointment, which no one wants to do, or, responding to that lead quicker. These are the things that, time is of the essence for everyone, but it seems that, everyone's time has gotten even shorter. So those are two things that I think that are going to be driving change in the first quarter. And as well as just continuing, all of the manufacturers are coming out with great product. And it's just continuing to do what we need to do to rise to the top and making our brands more appealing than to my competitors. So that's our charge in quarter one and throughout 2025.
No, I love that. I think that those were two really, really important key points. The first one being that legislation, everybody's got to be focusing on that with what's going to be coming with tariffs, like you said. And then the AI, to your point, is always going to be there and it's not going anywhere. And it's only going to get more and more advanced. So
very much so.
Appreciate you sharing those two things and sharing such amazing, valuable insights. Where is the best way for our audience or other people to connect with you to be able to learn more about you?
My email address is jross@bobrossauto.com. I am on LinkedIn. I believe it's under my name. And I think I know I'm on Instagram. I'm not a huge, and Twitter as well. All
Awesome.
under my name, I believe, as far as I know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's probably your name for everything. So we appreciate you, Janelle, for coming on here, sharing your insights and just so many great gems that you dropped today with everything that we discussed. We appreciate you and thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you for the opportunity and have a great day.
Thank you.